My name is Jessica, and at 28 years old, I finally learned what it means to stand up for yourself, but not in the way I ever imagined. It all started the day my parents told me they'd mortgaged our family home. Not for me, not for something life-saving, but for my brother, again. I remember the silence that followed, the kind that feels too heavy to breathe in. My mom's eyes darted away as she said, "It's just temporary, honey. Your brother needs another chance." Another chance? He'd already burned through 3 businesses, each one crashing harder than the last. And now, the only thing left to burn was the roof over our heads. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the wedding binder spread open on the table, the one I'd been building since I was 15. Every picture, every color palette, every little dream, suddenly felt like a luxury I no longer deserved. Because my parents didn't just want my understanding, they wanted my help. They wanted me to cancel my venue, scale back the guest list, and keep things simple, so my brother could get back on his feet. I wish I could say I was shocked, but the truth is, I wasn't. I was tired. Tired of being the responsible one. Tired of being the afterthought. Tired of watching my family set themselves on fire just to keep my brother warm. That's when the voice in my head whispered something I'd never let myself think before. Maybe this isn't about money. Maybe it's about worth. And in that moment, a seed of defiance took root. Quiet, but unshakable. It would grow into something none of us saw coming. Pause beat. But before I tell you how it all unfolded, how a wedding turned into a war zone of buried resentment, I need to take you back to where it really began. Because revenge doesn't start with anger, it starts with neglect. If you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, you'll want to hear this. And hey, if stories like this hit close to home, consider subscribing, because around here, we tell the truth others stay quiet about. I grew up in a house where love had conditions. If my brother, Ethan, so much as remembered to take out the trash, my mom would beam like he'd cured cancer. But if I brought home straight A's, it was expected. "Jessica's the responsible one," they'd say. "She doesn't need praise." At first, I believed them. I thought maybe that's what maturity looked like, keeping quiet while the spotlight always shone somewhere else. But slowly, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every family gathering was a shrine to Ethan's potential. He was the dreamer, the visionary, the boy who just needed a break. Meanwhile, I was the safety net, invisible, dependable, and conveniently available whenever his dreams collapsed. When his first business failed, they blamed bad partners. When his second one fell apart, it was bad timing. By the third, even his excuses ran out. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night, hearing my dad say, "He's not a failure, he just needs someone to believe in him." And my mom, ever his defender, whispered back, "That's what family is for." I wanted to scream, because belief wasn't the issue, accountability was. But saying that out loud would make me the ungrateful daughter. So I swallowed my frustration, year after year, until it turned into something sharp inside me, something that cut deeper every time I had to smile and pretend I was proud of him. Still, I stayed silent. Because in families like mine, silence isn't weakness, it's conditioning. I learned early that speaking up only made me the villain. So I became the peacekeeper, the listener, the one who always made things okay. But here's the cruel part. Peacekeepers are the ones who break the hardest. And that breaking point came the day Ethan showed up at my apartment with that smug grin and said, "Jess, Mom said you'll help out with the wedding. I mean, you owe them, right?" That word, owe, it echoed in my chest like a gunshot. That was the day I realized something. I didn't owe anyone anything, except myself, the life I'd spent years apologizing for wanting. Slow, dramatic pause. But breaking free from family guilt isn't clean. It's messy, it's ugly, and it never happens without consequences. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for choosing yourself, then what happens next will feel painfully familiar. Because the moment I said no to my family, They declared war. The call came on a Sunday morning. I was sipping coffee, half listening to the rain outside, when my mom's name flashed across my phone. Her voice was unusually soft, the kind of softness that always came before a favor. "Jess, sweetheart, your father and I need to talk to you about the wedding." My stomach tightened. I'd been dreading this conversation ever since the mortgage news. "Still," I said. "Okay, what's going on?" There was a pause, a long, practiced silence, and then she sighed. "Your brother's situation is worse than we thought. We had to refinance the house again. We're falling behind on payments, and, well, we need you to make some adjustments." Adjustments. That word felt like a knife wrapped in silk. "What kind of adjustments?" I asked. "Maybe scale down the guest list, cancel the band, have a smaller venue. You don't need all that anyway, do you? It's not about the show, it's about love." I could hear Dad in the background, his voice muffled but firm. "Tell her it's just temporary. Family comes first, family comes first." Funny how that line only ever seemed to apply to Ethan. I wanted to stay calm. I wanted to sound reasonable. But something inside me snapped. "Mom," I said quietly, "you mortgaged your house for him. You're drowning in debt for him. And now you want me to give up my wedding? For him too?" Silence. Then she whispered, "You're being selfish, Jessica." That word hit me harder than I expected. Because for years, they'd called Ethan ambitious for chasing dreams that destroyed them financially. But me? The one who'd worked 2 jobs, built a life, and saved for her own wedding? I was selfish. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But the damage was already done. The moment that call ended, I knew something in me had shifted permanently. I wasn't their quiet, compliant daughter anymore. I was someone they couldn't control, and that terrified them. The next few weeks became a battlefield of subtle guilt trips. Texts from Mom saying, "We raised you better than this." Calls from Dad reminding me, "Your brother would do the same for you," even though we both knew he wouldn't. But the final straw came when Ethan himself showed up uninvited, holding a beer in one hand and fake sympathy in the other. "Come on, Jess," he said. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a wedding. You'll have others." That's when I realized he didn't just feel entitled to my parents' sacrifices. He felt entitled to mine. Slow pause. Tension builds. And that's when I decided, if they wanted me to cancel my wedding, I'd give them something far more unforgettable instead. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't scream or shout. It simply watches and waits, because the sweetest justice isn't destruction, it's revelation. The night after Ethan's visit, I sat alone at my kitchen table, wedding invitations scattered around me like broken promises. Each one I picked up felt heavier than the last, not because of the paper, but because of what it represented. Years of effort, years of waiting for one moment that was finally supposed to be mine. But now, it felt like they were trying to take that too. I stared at the invitation addressed to Mom and Dad. The irony hit hard. How do you invite people to celebrate your happiness when they're the ones who keep stealing it? I poured myself a glass of wine, something I almost never did, and started replaying the last conversation with my mother in my head. Family comes first. Those words looped like static. Then suddenly, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. For 28 years, family came first, but only if that family was Ethan. I looked at my phone. 20 missed messages. Every single one from Mom. Every single one a guilt trip wrapped in emotional manipulation. That's when something inside me clicked. A strange calm washed over me, the kind that doesn't come from peace, but from clarity. If they wanted to play emotional chess, I'd stop playing checkers. I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't beg. I'd plan. The next day, I called my best friend, Lauren, the only person who'd ever seen the real picture behind my perfect family. When she picked up, I didn't even say hello. I just said, "They want me to cancel my wedding." There was silence, and then a sharp inhale. "What?" I told her everything, the mortgage, the guilt, The ultimatum. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I was done, she said something I'll never forget. Then make the wedding about you for once, Jess. Not them. That line hit me like a jolt of electricity. Because she was right. For years, every decision I made had been filtered through what my family would think. But not this time. So I started making quiet changes. The guest list? Trimmed down. The seating chart? Rearranged. No special treatment for anyone. And the speeches? Oh, those would be unforgettable. I wasn't planning revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't out to humiliate anyone. I just wanted them to see me, really see me, for the first time in their lives. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming. Beat pause. Low emotional piano cue. Because when you spend your whole life being silent, the moment you finally speak, it echoes louder than any scream. They thought they could guilt me into giving up my happiness. They had no idea they just pushed me into becoming someone I didn't even know I could be. And what happened next? Let's just say, my wedding wasn't the only thing that got exposed that night. From the outside, everything looked the same. The invitations went out. The florist was confirmed. The dress was fitted. If my parents noticed how calm I'd become, they probably thought I'd come to my senses. They had no idea. Because behind that calm smile, I was building something they'd never expect. A moment of truth disguised as a wedding. It started with a list, not of guests or vendors, but of truths. Every time I remembered a moment I'd been dismissed, belittled, or overshadowed, I wrote it down. The time Ethan crashed my car and Dad made me apologize for overreacting. The time Mom told me not to wear red to prom because it would steal your brother's date's attention. The countless times they'd called me too emotional whenever I cried from exhaustion. Each memory went into a notebook, my quiet record of injustice. It wasn't rage anymore. It was documentation. Then I began rewriting my wedding speech, not as a celebration of my family, but as a declaration of self. The kind of speech no one would see coming, honest, unfiltered, and surgical in its precision. Meanwhile, I played along. I nodded during family dinners. I pretended to understand the situation. When Mom suggested I wear her old wedding earrings for luck, I smiled and said, "Of course." Let them think they'd won. Let them think their guilt still worked. What they didn't realize was that guilt only works when you still need their approval. And for the first time in my life, I didn't. Lauren, my best friend, was the only one who knew. She'd smirk whenever I'd say, "It's all under control," like she could see the fire behind my calm exterior. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" she asked one night. "Not revenge," I said. "Just truth." "Truth can be a weapon," she warned. Exactly. And with that, the plan was set. Every piece of the wedding, from the seating arrangements to the music, would build toward one thing. That one moment when I finally stopped pretending. The guests would see a celebration. My family would see a reckoning. Slight pause. Soft tension build. The countdown had begun. And with every passing day, I felt something new replacing the fear. Not anger, not bitterness, but power. People always say weddings are about love, but sometimes they're about something far deeper, finally choosing yourself after a lifetime of being chosen last. And for me, that choice was coming faster than anyone expected. The morning of my wedding was almost too perfect. The sky was clear, the air smelled of roses and rain, and for the first time in months, my reflection didn't look tired. It looked ready. As the hairstylist pinned the last curl in place, my mom burst into the room, eyes red from happy tears. She hugged me tightly, her perfume, that same familiar lavender, wrapping around me like a memory I didn't want to revisit. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." I smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give when you already know the ending. Behind her, Dad was adjusting his tie, muttering something about parking chaos, and Ethan was laughing loudly. Too loudly, holding a drink at 10 a.m. classic. It should have hurt. It didn't. Not anymore. Lauren walked in a moment later, catching my eye. Just a small nod. Our silent code. It was almost time. The ceremony went off without a hitch. The guests clapped. The vows were exchanged. And for a brief moment, under that arch of flowers, I let myself breathe. Not because of the man I was marrying, though he was everything I'd ever hoped for, but because I knew this day would finally be mine. But as soon as the reception started, I felt the shift. My mom had rearranged the seating chart for convenience. Ethan, of course, was front and center, right next to the stage, and my parents were all smiles, acting like the proud family who'd supported me through everything. Except they hadn't. They'd taken, demanded, and rewritten every chapter of my life to make themselves the heroes. But not tonight. I watched as my mother clinked her glass, standing up to give her impromptu speech. Our daughter Jessica has always been so mature, so responsible. We couldn't be prouder of the woman she's become. The guests clapped politely. I could feel my pulse in my ears. She's always put family first, Mom continued, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. And even when times were tough, she never let us down. That was it. The irony, the hypocrisy, the complete lack of self-awareness. And something in me, something that had waited 28 years for this, finally stood up. I reached for the microphone. My voice didn't shake. Thank you, Mom. That was beautiful. A few people laughed softly, thinking it was just a sweet moment. But Lauren knew. She could see it in my eyes. Because my speech, the one no one expected, was about to begin. Pause. Quiet breath, low strings swell in background. And once I started, there would be no going back. People think revenge has to be loud, but sometimes it starts with a single word, spoken in the calmest voice in the room. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of 100 eyes settle on me. The microphone felt heavier than it should have, maybe because this wasn't just a speech, it was release. I wasn't planning to say much tonight, I began, smiling softly. But my mom's words reminded me of something important, how we define family. The room went still. Some guests leaned in. Others exchanged polite smiles, expecting a sentimental toast. Growing up, I learned that family means sacrifice, that sometimes you give everything, time, money, even dreams, for the people you love. And I did that. I really did. I paused, locking eyes with Ethan across the table. He grinned lazily, clearly thinking this was about to turn into a tearful thank you speech. But over time, I realized something. Love without respect isn't love, it's control. And sacrifice without balance isn't family, it's servitude. The air shifted. The laughter died. Even the background music seemed to lower itself in deference to what was unfolding. I saw Mom's smile falter, just slightly. Dad straightened in his chair. For years, I continued, I was told to keep the peace, to be grateful, to never make things harder than they already were. And I tried. I tried so hard that I lost sight of myself. Lauren was biting her lip, tears already threatening. But I've learned that being the good daughter doesn't mean being silent. It doesn't mean fixing everything while watching yourself fall apart. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I could feel his ego start to crack. So tonight, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for teaching me exactly who I don't want to be. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mom's hand tightened around her glass. And I want to thank my husband, I continued, turning to him with genuine warmth, for showing me that love doesn't ask you to shrink. It asks you to stand tall. Applause began tentatively, unsure whether this was safe ground again. But I wasn't finished. And finally, to my family. I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I won't carry your guilt anymore. The last words hung in the air like smoke. No one moved. No one dared. I handed the mic back to the DJ, smiled, and said, "Now let's dance." For a moment, no one clapped. Then Lauren stood, And then another guest, and another, until the whole room erupted in applause. Not for perfection, but for truth. Mom didn't speak to me the rest of the night. Dad avoided eye contact. Ethan stormed out before dessert. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt before. Peace. Soft piano outro begins. They wanted to hijack my wedding. Instead, I turned it into my freedom. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about finally refusing to let them destroy you. The morning after the wedding, the world felt still, too still. Sunlight poured through the curtains, soft and golden, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like an ending and a beginning, all at once. My phone was full of notifications, texts from friends, missed calls from relatives. Some said things like, "That speech was incredible." Others just sent a single line, "Are you okay?" But not a single message from my parents. Not one. I didn't expect one either, because people who build their power on your silence don't know what to do when you finally speak. Later that afternoon, Lauren came over with coffee. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, scrolling through the flood of online posts. Apparently, clips of the speech had already made their way onto social media. Someone had recorded it. The comments were wild. Half the internet was cheering, the other half arguing about whether I'd gone too far. But one line stood out to me more than the rest. "This isn't revenge. This is liberation." That's exactly what it was. 2 days later, Mom finally called. Not to apologize. That would have been too much to hope for. Just to say, "You embarrassed this family, Jessica." Her voice was cold, sharp, and trembling with the kind of anger that only comes from being exposed. I took a slow breath and replied, "No, Mom. I told the truth. You just didn't like hearing it out loud." Click. She hung up. That silence, that sharp, definitive click, felt like the final chapter slamming shut. Over the next few weeks, something strange happened. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I just felt lighter. For years, my self-worth had been tied to their approval, like oxygen I couldn't live without. But now, breathing on my own felt effortless. I stopped replaying old arguments in my head, stopped imagining what I could have said differently. Because for the first time, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Ethan tried calling once, not to apologize, but to smooth things over. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail, something about keeping the family together. The irony made me laugh. The truth was, there was no family to keep together anymore. Just the illusion of one. And illusions only survive when you're willing to believe in them. I wasn't. Not anymore. Soft, reflective music fades in. They say blood is thicker than water. But they never mention that sometimes blood can drown you faster. That night, I lit a candle by my window, a small ritual I'd started to remind myself that endings can be beautiful too. The flame flickered once, twice, then steadied, and so did I. Sometimes the only way to heal is to let go of the people who taught you to doubt your worth. Because peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from finally choosing distance. It's strange how silence can change its meaning. For years, silence in my family meant submission, the kind that keeps you small, careful, unseen. But now, my silence feels different. It feels like peace. The first week after the wedding, my husband and I escaped to a cabin by the lake. No phones, no social media, just space. Real, uninterrupted space. The kind I'd been craving my entire life without realizing it. Each morning, we'd sit by the water, the mist rising like a veil, and I'd just breathe. No voices telling me what I should do. No expectations. Just the sound of water and the beating of my own heart. Steady, calm, mine. On the third day, my husband said something simple but powerful. "You know, Jess, I've never seen you this quiet." I laughed softly. "I've been loud my whole life, just not out loud." He smiled. That gentle, understanding smile that had drawn me to him in the first place. then maybe it's time the world finally heard you. That line stayed with me. Because he wasn't talking about revenge, or validation, or proving anyone wrong. He was talking about truth, my truth, and learning how to live it every day without apology. Back home, things were different. My phone stayed quiet. The family group chat had gone silent, probably deleted, knowing my mother. But I didn't feel the urge to fix it this time. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. Some are meant to teach you when to stop trying. I started journaling again, not the angry kind, but the kind that builds clarity. I wrote about strength that comes quietly, about dignity that doesn't beg, and about the kind of love that feels like freedom, not debt. Slowly, I started sharing pieces of my story online, not to shame anyone, but to reach the ones who felt unseen in their own families. The messages I got back were overwhelming. This made me feel less alone. Your story gave me the courage to say no. I thought I was the only one. That's when I realized this wasn't just my healing, it was ours. Soft music begins, gentle piano and strings. The best revenge isn't loud. It's not about making them regret losing you. It's about no longer needing to be found. And maybe that's the real ending, or the real beginning. Because when you stop chasing validation, you start attracting peace. And when you finally choose yourself, you don't just break the cycle, you rewrite it. If you've ever been the one holding your family together while losing yourself, remember, you're allowed to start over. And sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is stop trying to be loved by people who only loved the version of you that served them. Calm, nostalgic background music fades in, soft strings and ambient piano. I used to believe that family meant obligation, that love meant sacrificing yourself until there was nothing left, that if I just kept being good, patient, forgiving, maybe they'd finally see me. But I've learned something that took me almost 3 decades to understand. Love without respect isn't love. It's control, dressed in guilt. For years, I thought standing up for myself meant being cruel, shouting back, cutting people off, proving a point. But it's not about that. It's about truth. It's about looking someone in the eyes and saying, "You don't get to rewrite who I am just because it makes you uncomfortable." And when you finally speak that truth, calmly, clearly, and without hate, the world shifts. Not because they change, but because you do. My parents still don't talk to me much. And honestly, that's okay. Because I've made peace with something bigger. The idea that family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes, it's the people who show up when you're at your lowest and say, "I see you. You don't have to earn love here." That's the kind of family I'm building now. One conversation, one boundary, one peaceful morning at a time. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one everyone leaned on but no one listened to, I want you to know something. You deserve peace. You deserve reciprocity. And you deserve to live a life that doesn't revolve around fixing the people who broke you. I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but your worth isn't defined by who stays or who leaves. It's defined by how deeply you learn to stay true to yourself. Because in the end, the most powerful revenge isn't revenge at all. It's freedom. It's building a life so honest, so peaceful, that the people who once tried to control your story no longer recognize the person you've become. This was my story, my lesson, my liberation. My name is Jessica, and I finally learned that the best kind of love is the kind that starts with yourself. If Jessica's story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes just writing it down is the first step to letting it go. And if you believe more people deserve to hear stories like this, tap that subscribe button. Because every week we share real voices, real emotions, and real lessons that remind us. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is peace.